So the BOLT OLT can actually be turned up in multiple ways, and today we're going to talk about a BOLT manual turnup. So it can be commissioned in one of two ways. You can either do using ZTP, but if you're using ZTP, this requires setting an URL in the DHCP server, and it also requires a ZTP server that's reachable by the OLT, and those may not exist in the environment you're going in. That's more geared toward rack and stack in large data center environments. But you can also use manual configuration, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And also BOLT comes pre-configured to address some of the common scenarios, and we'll look at that. So the steps for manual configuration are first disabling ZTP because we don't want it to interfere with our install or configuration. The second is setting a static IP address. Typically, if you're managing it from the EMS, you're going to want a static IP. Modifying any of your uplinks as required from the defaults that ZTP will install at the factory. Creating and assigning the management VLAN if the defaults don't work for you. Ensuring network connectivity, because you want to make sure that you do have network connectivity before you leave the site. And also adding BOLT to the EMS as the final step. So when BOLT is delivered from the factory, it's delivered with a configuration file that has 3 lags auto-configured, hopefully to help speed up installation in most cases. So the first is net1. The net1 lag is going to contain the 4 SFP plus slots, and you can put either 1G or 10G lasers in there. When you do, the far end needs to be set for auto negotiate off. But you can put either 4 10 gigs or 4 1 gigs. You can't mix them unless you manually change the configuration, because all the ports in a lag must be the same speed. There's also net2, which has the 4 40 gig QSOP ports in the lag. And then there's also net3, and net3 contains the 200G QSOP28 ports. So you can pick any one of those, and if you plug them in, management is already configured with VLAN 101 untagged on net 1, 102 on net 2, and 103 on net 3. And so that way you can plug them in and you should be able to communicate almost immediately, especially if you have a DHCP server already set up in your network. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at those steps that we talked about for manual configuration. Okay, so now we have the OLT started up and it's booting. And very shortly now, it'll come up to the initial prompt. It'll also print out what version is running, which is quite helpful. But we're going to log in with the initial default username and password, which is admin and tellabs. And it's going to ask me to change my password. So I'll enter the default password and change it. And it's finishing the boot process, and just momentarily we'll see it go normal. But we're going to put ourselves in config mode because we need to make some changes. And we're going to set the ZTP mode to ZTP disabled. So we'll say tolt system ZTP config ZTP mode and disabled. And we're going to commit that change. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to say show running config, TOLT system management. And we can see that right now we're set up for DHCP. And so when we're running with EMS, we want it to always have the same IP address. So we probably want to change that to static. So I'll show you how to do that. We'll go back into config mode. We'll say TOLT system management. And then we'll see what configurable attributes there are. So the first thing we need to do is set the IP mode. And the IP mode needs to be set to static. Right now it's set to DHCP, we need to set it to static. Then what we need to do is set the IPv4 address. And we need to set the IPv4 gateway. Oh, I didn't set the address, sorry. 172.29.22.137. Now we'll say IPv4 net mask 255.255.255.0. Then we'll set the IPv4 gateway to 172.29.122.1, whatever is appropriate for your network. And then we're going to commit those changes. So unfortunately, during the LA release, we have to actually reboot to get the change to happen. So we're going to reboot, and we'll come back when we get to the prompt. Okay, so we're back at the login prompt now. It's rebooted. We'll log in. Then we'll say show running config TOLT system management. And we can see that now we have our static IP address. So we could also do show TOLT system management. That's a handy command whenever the system is set up for DHCP so that you can discover the IP address. But that gives us the IP address that we need to be able to connect to for the EMS. Then the process for adding to the EMS is pretty much the same as you're used to. So now what we'll do is we'll add to the EMS. We'll say add OLT. We'll give the IP address 172.29.122.137. We'll say read from the OLT so that we can just basically use the settings that we've already put in. And it will read the data out of the OLT. It'll take a second to think about it. All right, and so now we can see here, we can set the TID. The TID by default is set to the serial number of the element. We can say, we can add to it, we can change it. You can set the TID to whatever you'd like. Then we'll say confirm and apply. We'll see that it'll get added. We can see in the background all the changes that are being made by the EMS showing up on the OLT. And we have it added. So that's how we would get it added to the EMS. In large part, the management is pretty much the same. There's one other subject we'll cover, and that is how to do software upgrades. So we'll get back to the terminal and we'll take a look at that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at software download. So with the LA release of BOLT, the EMS doesn't currently manage the software. It's done via the CLI of the OLT. This will not be the case in the released load, and so this is only something that you'll have to do for a very short amount of time, but it will always be available to you as a resource. You can always update the software using this mechanism, and it's quite handy. So what we're going to do first is we're going to issue a command, tolt system software list. And so what you'll notice here is everything says local, and that means that these are all loads that are local to the board. And you can store up to 5 loads. The oldest one will be deleted. There's also the previous and running, and you'll notice that we're currently running 147, and the previous load that we were running before was 146. So now what we'll do is we'll go into config mode, and we need to configure a piece of information, and it is tolt system mgmt config software server URL http://172.28.152.65, which is my EMS IP, and then it'll download on port 6202. And we need to commit that change. Now, if we issue that command again, we'll see tolt system software list. You'll see that the list is quite a bit longer. So we're now running 147. So let's go ahead and set it up to run 148. So we'll say tolt system software download image name, and the image name is right here that we want, 148, and we'll hit enter, and it'll download that load. It's pretty quick. So it has now downloaded the load to the BOLT. So now what we're going to do next is we're going to say tolt system software switch image name, once again same name, and we're going to hit enter. So now what it's doing is it is, number one, backing up the database. Every time we do an upgrade, we always do a back of the database local to the board, and that ensures that you have a paired software release with the last config that was used on that software release. It'll also copy over the database to the new software release. It's also copying and moving all the files that it needs for the new software release. And once it's completed that, all those copies, it will actually switch over. Additionally, if the database is incompatible, it will not switch, and it'll tell you immediately that the database is not compatible. Essentially, we spawn another instance of the database, load the current database into it using the new software. And if that works, we know that the database will upgrade correctly and we can safely make a switch. If the database is incompatible, the system will simply stop, tell you that it's incompatible, and then you can call Tellabs and we'll address it. That should never really happen in normal practice, but the good news is that you're now protected, and that if that does happen, we know ahead of time and we won't switch. Okay, you can see that we've upgraded the software. We're now up and running on the software load 148, and we did all that in real time. It's much faster and hopefully a lot simpler.